Of the last session, the audience and the participants have been extraordinary in their attention span and in what we call their Sitzfleisch, their ability to sit and listen and perhaps even absorb. This session is anti-Semitism, xenophobia, racism, modern challenges and threats. We have an interesting series of presentations. The first presentation will be given by Dr. Shimon Samuels, who is a Director of International Relations for the Sam Wiesenthal Center, and who combines both a tremendous amount of historical understanding with the spirit of activism and participation in these struggles. His title of his presentation is The Theft of Jewish Identity and Ultimate Anti-Semitism.
Excuse me, could we have the PowerPoint? Oh, it is? Okay, great. Thank you. Do we want to give us any more time for people to come in?
Нет, начнем.
Huh? Okay.
Please begin.
All right. Whoever was at the opening yesterday, feels like a week, I spoke a little bit about a certain idea and a project, and that was to set up a task force on best practices. I feel that we, as a small operation in Europe, based in Paris, covering Europe, Latin America, and international institutions, we have to be very selective. We look for the holes in the cheese. And there are now more holes than cheese. But we also, what I mean by that is that we take cases where no other Jewish organization is active. And, for example, they include the World Social Forum in Porto Alegre, Brazil, which was founded more or less at the same time as the 2001 United Nations Conference Against Racism in Durban. I had the dishonor of being elected to the steering committee of Durban for the 2 years before it, and was gagged and finally thrown out of that steering committee in Durban. But what replaced it as a vector was the World Social Forum. And that became hijacked by the Palestinian cause and served as the dating and marriage ground between extreme left and Islamist transcessionists' interests. So it was also a coordination point, and still is, for BDS around the world and for the flotilla, as also for Jewish ID theft, which is what I'm going to talk about. And the first example that I'm going to give is in the framework of UNESCO and its World Heritage Committee. And so, if this thing works, UNESCO World Heritage Committee is to protect and preserve sites of universal value. And I recall in the end of the 90s, some of you may also remember that there was an Auschwitz discotheque. It was opened in the tannery where the hair was cut. We went to Polish officials in Warsaw. We had no joy. And finally, after the mayor of Oswiecim also wouldn't help, he said that we're entitled to have a discotheque. And I said, you can have a dozen, but not there in the protected zone. I went to Cairns, Australia, to the World Heritage Committee. It was a long trip. And I asked for my 3 minutes. And the Finnish ambassador, who was the chair, said, okay, go ahead. I said, I've just come from the hell of Auschwitz to the paradise of the Barrier Reef. And he stopped me and he said, just to have those two words in conjunction, Auschwitz and discotheque, is impossible. Turned to the Polish ambassador and said, Mr. Ambassador, we're not asking you to, to talk about this. This isn't a protest. We are telling you to close it. And by the time I got back, in this case to London, it was closed. Well, things have changed. So, as the German strategist Karl von Clausewitz claimed that war is diplomacy by other means, since Palestine entered UNESCO in November 2011, the Heritage Committee is a battlefield. And on grounds of emergency, and the EU always use emergency, Palestine has annually received Christian and Jewish sites as its own heritage. In 2012 in St. Petersburg, here in Russia, the Church of the Nativity and the Bethlehem pilgrimage route, which was a little ironic after a few years before, the Fatah had occupied the church and there were casualties among the priests. Also, the professional advisor to UNESCO said that there was no emergency and no need for this. The Palestinians said that there was a leak in the ceiling of the church. Indeed, there was for some 70 years. 2013 in Phnom Penh, Batir, Judaism's Beitar headquarters for Bar Kokhba's revolt against the Romans. 2014, this was in the UNESCO Executive Board, acknowledgement of Rachel's tomb as a mosque, and that was endorsed in Doha, in Qatar, where I spent a miserable week. 2015 in Bonn, the Burak Wall, and we'll come back to that, the western wall of the temple. And there we had the support of the German ambassador, who was the chair, when I said to him that, do you wish the holiest shrine of Judaism, the Western Wall, to be stolen here in Germany? And he got the point, and at midnight that night he called me to my hotel and said, we have removed it. But it came back. 2016, the Temple Mount registered only in its Islamic identity as Haram al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary, and not the Kotel. 2017 in Krakow, it was Hebron and the Tomb of the Patriarchs. I gave my 3 minutes, and I didn't realize until I got a little note put in my hand that the gentleman sitting to my left was the mayor of Hebron, who in '86 personally shot 6 yeshiva students in the cave while they were praying. He spent many years in Israeli jails and was exchanged for the 1,000 plus in exchange for Gilad Shalit. And so I said that I find myself sitting next to a man with blood on his hands. His very invitation shows that UNESCO has blood on its hands. This year in Manama, in Bahrain, they were supposed to focus on the Qumran caves and the Dead Sea Scrolls. But with the new Director General after Madame Bokova, who has been wonderful, her replacement wanted to start a depoliticization system, a very interesting idea, and so that this did not come up. What did come up, it was the Jerusalem issue, and that was based upon consensus this time. Every year at the UNESCO Executive Board, followed by the World Heritage Committee, the resolutions on Jerusalem and other Jewish heritage sites are, as a war of attrition, increasingly more hostile to Israel. The objective of ID theft in the Holy Land. Palestine seeks its validation through the theft of Jewish and Christian narratives. Supersessionism is a historical imperative, and it's deleted so many peoples from their history and geography. But in the case of the Jewish people, especially after the Holocaust, delegitimization is a step towards annihilation. In a taxonomy of anti-Semitism, ID theft may be viewed as genocidal intent to erase the Jewish state from time and space. Okay, I'd now like to show you just what happened 3 weeks ago in Paris in UNESCO. The idea of depoliticization was based upon a very simple trick, which Israel accepted, and that is that all of the bad stuff in the resolution would be placed within an annex in a sort of a black square around those details, and only the date and issue would appear on top. So here we have that, and as you see, this time around, there's no square. It wasn't out of the box. It says Annex 1. And this was about occupied Palestine, etc. second one was about the Golan Heights, occupied, and Israeli crimes in education against Palestine. So here again we have it, and here it starts with Annex 2. So, in fact, this was a breach of good faith on the part of the Palestinians and their supporters, and they do have supporters which control the World Heritage Committee. Okay, now, we have an exhibition which we called People Book Land, the 3,500-year relationship of the Jewish people with the land of Israel, or with the Holy Land, if you so prefer. It was done with UNESCO. It was postponed, it was cancelled, and then we did it. We had it in the Vatican, in the UN in New York. We've had it in the Council of Europe and other exciting places. It will be coming soon to Moscow. And that's 3,500 years. But they wanted to beat us, so it's 4,000 years of Palestine history. But if you look into it, you'll find that during the Mandate period, for example, Palestine Broadcasting Corporation, which was run by Jews, or Palestine Airlines, are part of this narrative. So this is one example. I would like now to turn a little bit, okay, here. Just come back to Burak Wall. This is interesting. We found this on it was a Lebanese stand at the Frankfurt Book Fair. And the Burak Wall, anybody here know who was Burak? What was Burak? One lady, okay. Burak was the winged steed, the horse that took, according to Islamic tradition, Muhammad from Mecca to heaven, but via Jerusalem, Al-Quds. There were no direct flights in those days. So he is supposed to have tethered Burak to a wall, the wall being the Western Wall. In geographical terms, it's a brilliant idea because the wall is next to the Mughrabi ascent, which goes up to the Temple Mount. And this is part of the Holy Basin, which means that the Burak Wall, if approached by non-Muslims, this is trespassing. And if you remember the number of knifings and other violent incidents to defend the honor of Burak and Al-Aqsa. So this is a very serious situation, but it takes me now to the second hole in the cheese. Here we have, we monitor Arab book fairs. So this is Abu Dhabi. You can see quite a lot of books. Next is Casablanca and Doha. After that, we went to Riyadh and Muscat. And finally, we come to the Olympics of book fairs, and that's Frankfurt. We have an agreement with the authorities of the Frankfurt Book Fair. It isn't a question of freedom of expression which is in question. We have an agreement to identify hate, incitement to hate and violence on the shelves, which is in fact a contravention of the contract signed between the exhibitor and the book fair. And this has been going on now. This was our 14th year. I was in the book fair only 3 or 4 weeks ago. And we always find very interesting things. We give an annual prize. It's called the Worst Offender Award. And you have no idea how many countries are competing for that award. So, anyhow, in the case of Turkey, Turkey was a very interesting example. It was full of these books. By the way, we give to the Frankfurt Book Fair, as we find the publishers in the Arab book fairs, we give them the names and they're blacklisted. The problem is they come anyway because they come under an Arab collective. So, but Turkey was an interesting story in that we, on the 33 stands of Turkey, there was an immense number of anti-Semitic literature. Suddenly, because Turkey was going to be the honored guest a year later, it all disappeared. I asked to speak with the president of the Turkish Publishers Association, and I said, what happened? And he said, oh, there was this Neanderthal center. I said, Wiesenthal Center? Oh, yes. And they complained to the Germans. The Germans came to Ankara, and so we took it all out, and we don't put anything in that can be... No. Okay, finally, just what our prizes are this year. Our prizes this year went to Malaysia. That was the first prize. Are books by Prime Minister Mahathir, 93 years old, the only, I think, head of state or head of government who is a publicly declared anti-Semite. The runner-up was Iran for its very beautiful children's books for 4 to 7 years old, extolling jihad and shahada, suicide terrorism. So I made a similar presentation to this in the European Parliament. And I didn't know that sitting in the audience there was a British MP who was very close to then Prime Minister David Cameron. David Cameron was given the list of books that had been translated into English. Many of them were translated into German, and you could see imams coming with their flock from their Muslim, the Quranic school, madrasa, and looking at these books with great intensity. But others were translated into French, German, Spanish, and English. And that list of English titles went to David Cameron. And he said, we're not going to let this to come into Britain. In fact, he banned them, and therein lies a lesson. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Samuels. Our next speaker is Ira Foreman, who is a visiting professor and a senior fellow at the Center on Contemporary Anti-Semitism at Georgetown University's Center for Jewish Civilization. He was for several years the State Department official responsible for anti-Semitism, a position that has not been filled in the new administration, and is one of the authorities on American political life, but also on anti-Semitism in the contemporary world. And his title is Confronting Anti-Semitism, Navigating the Complexities and Avoiding Self-Inflicted Setbacks. Ira.
Thank you, Michael. Just wanted to clarify that that position at the State Department is against anti-Semitism. You know, I don't. Sometimes people get that confused. So I want to thank the Russian Jewish Congress, and I want to thank all the other sponsors for inviting me to this session, because since leaving the State Department in 2017, I've stayed in the field of anti-Semitism, and one of the great difficulties, you can get all the English language material that's coming out of various countries, but to stay in any kind of touch with what's going on, you have to be on the ground. So I want to not only thank the sponsors, but many of you who've already in the last few days who've given me some insight of what your communities are facing has been very terribly important to me in continuing to do this work. So I teach, as Michael mentioned, at Georgetown University, a course called Confronting Contemporary Anti-Semitism. And it's not an academic course. We do a little history, a little theory, but mostly it's a hands-on course, teaching students to be, if they are potentially foreign service officers or Capitol Hill staffers or heads of NGOs working against anti-Semitism, or even citizen activists. We're teaching them how to analyze anti-Semitism in different countries, in different circumstances, and once you analyze it, what tools do you have to confront it? And they're amazing students, but one of the things that they look for is a simple answer. If they're taking cost accounting, they walk into that course without understanding the system, but by the time they're done with the course, they've got a system. They know if you go from A, you go to B, to go to C. And they're looking for the exact same thing with anti-Semitism. And we have to tell them literally every class, It doesn't work this way. The complexity of worldwide anti-Semitism is the thing that stunned me most when I went to the State Department. An example, we always talk about the Soviet Jewry movement and what an amazing accomplishment that was, starting with the refuseniks and then the diaspora communities that organized starting in the 60s, 70s. And when we started that movement, very few thought that it actually could be successful. It was an incredibly complex task, and yet it was great, almost miracle, especially after the failures of the Holocaust. But as difficult as that is, I tell our students, today's anti-Semitism is much more difficult because in the 60s and 70s, we had one address we had to go to deal with the problem. The address is the Kremlin. Here, we're facing literally dozens, scores of countries with anti-Semitic problems, and I can't tell you in any single country that there's one place to go, or there's always multiple places you need to go to deal with the problem. So I talk to our students about the importance in doing this analysis of the morphing of anti-Semitism. Even within a few years in a given country, it could be changing. The threat could be changing. You have to look at the morphing. You have to look at the data sets. Any of you who were at the plenum at the beginning of today's session had the magnificent story of all the different data sets you need to look at. And no one data set will tell you the story. And in fact, all the data sets don't tell you the story unless you're talking to people on the ground. Unless you're getting other sources and anecdotal and qualitative data, you have no idea what you're doing. And you always have to be open to being proven wrong. That what you think is happening is really not happening. What tool you think will work will not work. And that's the only way we can confront these issues. So some of the questions we must ask, and when we ask our students, is I think what we have to ask ourselves. What type of anti-Semitism are we dealing with? Where is it coming from in the country? Is it coming from the government? Is it coming from civil society? If it's coming from civil society, exactly where? What demographic? What ethnic or religious groups is it coming from? How does the Jewish community experience that anti-Semitism? And the Frost survey, which the new survey will be coming out, I gather, next month, gives us a great sense of that. But again, being on the ground and talking to Jewish communal leaders is absolutely essential. And then civil society. What's the civil society in that country like? Who are our potential allies in this fight? So then we have to move to what do we do? Now, in this conference, we've talked a lot about education. I think we all agree education is part of the key. The question, of course, is what type of education actually addresses the issue. Just teaching Holocaust may or may not be part of the solution. I'm not going to cover that. I'm not going to cover internet, where I have no particular expertise, but I want to talk about two other ways that we confront, two other tools I don't think we always talk about. The first is the way to confront is coalitions. You know, anti-Semitism is not a Jewish problem. It's a human rights problem. It's a problem for liberal and democratic societies. It's a threat to them. And it can't be fought alone by Jewish communities. And in fact, it can't be fought alone. We have an office in the U.S. government. The Germans have a domestic group like this. There are others now, bureaucracies that are being built up. But a government alone can't do this. So I always use the example that what was done in 2015 in Hungary when the Hungarian government was paying for a statue of a World War II historian. Actually, he was an historian of medieval Hungary during World War II, who was a rabid anti-Semite and advocated for the deportation of Jews and sponsored the legislation that stripped Jews of their citizenship rights. And he was going to put a statue up for him. And a coalition came together. It wasn't just the local Jewish community in Majahiz that stood up, but other local players stood up. The Pentecostal churches were one of the great allies, natural allies for the Jewish community. The United States government got involved, but that wasn't enough. The domestic Jewish organizations, NGOs in the United States got involved. That wasn't enough. We needed world Jewish organizations like WJC, European Jewish Congress, to be involved. We had the executive branch of the United States government involved, but that wasn't enough. We needed Congress. Congress is a separate branch in the U.S., of course, and the bipartisan coalition that came out and urged Prime Minister Orban to pull back was absolutely critical. A Democratic administration was not good enough. Republicans in Congress were essential. But it wasn't just this. It was also Israel. It was also our European allies, Canada, etc., all coming together and talking to the Hungarian government about, we obviously can't stop you. This is your decision. But we will make sure that you understand there's a cost to pay for honoring anti-Semites. And to their credit, they pulled back. So those types of coalitions are critical in many of the fights we take on anti-Semitism. The other piece of, or other tool I want to talk about is social ostracism. You know, we all had a text that we put in of our text, and I wrote in the text, it's somewhat embarrassing. I said, embarrassing in light of Pittsburgh. I wrote, the American Jewish community is the most secure Jewish community in history of diaspora. How embarrassing to say that today. Yet it's still true. It's still true, with all the problems we face. And one of the reasons it's true is a tool that we have in the United States, and that is sometimes used in Europe, but I don't think often enough, and frankly not often enough in the United States. It's social ostracism. So of course in the United States, because we have no hate speech laws, you can say the most heinous things about Jews. Jews to the gas. There's no criminal penalty. There is no civil penalty. People are allowed to say that. But they pay a cost, a social cost. So for example, we all heard about Charlottesville last year. But when many of those young men who were filmed on television saying, Jews, you will not replace us, went home to their communities, many of them lost their jobs because they were on TV. Many of them were thrown out of their households by their parents. That social ostracism is happening right now in Pittsburgh. You have coming together, I'm reading back from the States, in community after community after community, Christians, Muslims, local elected officials, community leaders are banding together to basically say, not in our community, we don't want you. The Muslim community in Pittsburgh in 3 days has raised $150,000 to give to the Jewish community. That type of social ostracism is absolutely key and needs to be exercised more in the United States, and we need to bring it more to Europe. It's a very powerful tool and allows, even with our free speech, for us to control the hate speech in the United States. Now, this is not all a happy story. The last 2 years, there's some indication that the taboo against bigoted speech may be eroding. We're seeing some raise in level, not historic, but getting closer to historic levels of anti-Semitic incidents, etc. So we have a lot to work to do. But not only is it work to do, it's work not to do. What we should not do. First, I talked about identifying where anti-Semitism came from in any given community. I like to take France as an example. Often in France, people never wanted to talk about violent anti-Semitism coming from parts of the Muslim community. Now, it's very, very small numbers. Yes, anti-Semitic attitudes in the Muslim community are higher than the general public in France, but many French Muslims don't hate Jews. And the numbers who are perpetrating violence are very small. But we need to identify that. By the same token, we do ourselves a disservice if we demonize whole groups of people when we identify those folks. Identify where it's coming from, being honest and hard-headed about exactly what's happening. But let's not demonize, because we need allies in every part of civil society. But besides demonization. The other thing we must not do, particularly in the American context, we have the most partisan, polarized society we've had perhaps since the Civil War, and we cannot possibly use anti-Semitism as an ideological or political weapon, and it's happening. It's beginning to happen. It's one of the few bipartisan issues in the United States, but it's beginning to happen. Just in the last few days, a columnist wrote, well, you see from Pittsburgh, anti-Semitism is all coming from the extreme right. Okay, so Farrakhan said is an anti-Semite, but he doesn't count because he has no power. This is ludicrous. This is not being hard-headed. This is not digging into what's really happening. And on the right, before Pittsburgh, we saw people saying, oh, it's all about Muslims or it's all about the extreme left. It's not. Now, in some countries, it may be one or the other. But worldwide, it's not. And in many countries, France and the United States, we have enemies on both sides of the extreme parts of our political society. Absolutely necessary that we call this stuff out. Democrats in the United States need to call out the left, and Republicans need to call out the right when anti-Semitism happens. And finally, what we also need to not do, we need to avoid false charges of anti-Semitism, or even in the gray areas. You don't have to always use the term anti-Semite. You can criticize something as inappropriate, as bigoted, etc., without using the term anti-Semitism. If it's not dead to rights anti-Semitism, we cheapen the term, and we can't afford to cheapen the term. Because we call, as we would say in English, we'd call, say the sky is falling too much. Eventually, when the sky is really falling, people won't believe you. So let me just close by saying that I think something that we all understand. We're not in the business of getting rid of anti-Semitism. We're not in that business. Anti-Semitism has been around for at least 2 millennia. We can all count on it being around for at least centuries more, well past the time we're gone and our great-great-grandchildren are gone. But if we're not eliminating anti-Semitism, what we are doing is turning it down. I like to use the metaphor of a faucet. We can't turn the faucet off. We can turn it down. It was turned down after World War II. It is essential to saving Jewish lives, to saving liberal societies, to saving democratic societies, to turn it down again. Thank you.
Дорогие коллеги, я с удовольствием предоставляю следующее слово профессору Стивену Бреннеру. Он является директором Центра глобальных исследований и занимается проблематикой геноцида. Пожалуйста, профессор.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be included among scholars and great activists. And I'll tell you, it's not easy following Ira Forman as a speaker. But perhaps I'll try and build on some of the points that have been raised. And I think I'm going to bring up some different issues than I thought I would. And I think the place to begin is that anti-Semitism is not independent. It's not an independent impulse. I think that is one of the biggest mistakes we make. Anti-Semitism is connected with a host of illiberal ideologies and standpoints that contest one thing at the end of the day. And that is the liberal rule of law. I think one can make a basic statement in this, and John Dewey would have called it a warranted assertion. It's not true all the time, but it's true almost all the time. And that is that the extent to which the liberal rule of law is operative is the extent to which any identity can be exercised. And this has a number of implications. First off, when one is opposing anti-Semitism, it has to be in terms of the liberal rule of law, a defense of the liberal rule of law. It's almost as if this is the same thing, or flip sides of the same coin. The second thing is that if one is defending the liberal rule of law in the fight against anti-Semitism, Jews have to be on the forefront of any kind of fighting any kind of intolerance. If we expect, as our foreman correctly said, if we need coalitions with other groups, we also have to be willing to join in with other groups when others are under attack. And I think that doesn't happen often enough. The great legacy of people like Abraham Herschel during the civil rights movement is an example to be followed. Unfortunately, it's too often forgotten. He walked with Martin Luther King. If I can put it this way, unless we do it in this manner, unless we understand the fight against anti-Semitism is a fight against the liberal, those who would undermine the liberal rule of law and its operative consequences, I think one winds up with a situation in which one recapitulates bigotry and one undermines the prospects of solidarity. In short, what does this mean? It means that we have to oppose, I think, something that lies at the core of any kind of racism. And it's an idea developed by Carl Schmitt, the famous Catholic conservative who became a Nazi, great legal theorist, arguably one of the greatest of the 20th century, and that is the claim that the friend-enemy distinction is at the core of politics. It's that distinction which I think informs any kind of racism and any kind of anti-Semitism. I don't think this is very difficult to grasp. There is an idea of a community which is organic. And what's usually not brought to light is something very obvious. That community has nothing to do with citizenship. Citizenship comes from the state, and it's sanctioned by the state. And the liberal rule of law guarantees, in principle, citizenship without regard to gender, race, religion, or anything else. That's the basic principle, I think, on which any democracy exists. And with that follows certain civil liberties accorded each person and each group in society, whether it's free speech or its right to assembly or what have you. What anti-Semitism builds on, as does racism, as does xenophobia, is an idea of community that exists beneath the liberal rule of law and beneath the state. The community opposes the state. The state is complex, it's bureaucratic, it's hierarchical, and it's considered an alienation of what is genuine about the community. And what is genuine about the community is that we experience the world the same way. We have the same myths. We share the same basic values. We go to the same church. The more organic, the more homogeneous the community, the stronger the temptation of fighting the other, whether the other is an immigrant or a Jew or, well, as occurred in the United States, or the Yankee going to the South to tell Southerners what to do with their Negroes. That's the way people spoke. Indeed, there's, I think, the clarity of opposition to the liberal notion of citizenship is crucial to any kind of racism. But there's also a political correlative to this, and that is the following. The organic community seeks what the Germans, actually what the Nazis like to call a Gleichschaltung, which is a coordination of all the different branches of government that should be competing with one another. One of the things we see today on the programs of right-wing parties, especially the far right in Europe, and I must say also with our president in the United States, is an attempt to coordinate and unify branches of government so that the possibility of checks and balances is undermined. To this extent, I think we're beginning to see sort of barricades form. I think Ira was quite right that when it comes to education, we have to ask what kind of education. And it seems to me we have to learn a bit more, certainly in the United States, not just about anti-Semitism or the hatred of Jews or even the Holocaust. It's, the ignorance is appalling, according to every poll that's come out. We have to learn a bit more about our liberal traditions and the threats that exist to them. It's absolutely amazing when I talk to my students. No one knows how to make an argument against democracy, and because they simply assume that it's fine, that everything's okay. We have a democratic order, and unless we know that, unless we teach that, we're in a lot of trouble. It seems to me also that if I can go one step further, than Ira did, it's quite true. We need social movements. We need that can pressure political policies and certainly create ostracism. But I think we have to do something else in concert. The great political theorist who is unfortunately forgotten and who actually had a great deal to say about Nazism is Ernst Fraenkel. And he spoke about the dual state. And the dual, what Fraenkel believed was that that the state is basically divided in a simple way. There is a sovereign who tries to exercise as much power as he can, arbitrarily. In other words, avoid the rules, avoid procedures, avoid traditions. And then there is another element of the state, which essentially is a defense of those rules, procedures, and the like. What we're seeing now all over Europe is an attack on the normative state by right-wing movements. And this type of cynicism which exists, certainly among some of our friends that I've met in Russia, but also in the United States, surely. I think we have to begin to reestablish a commitment to basic moral values, the idea of truth in reporting, the idea of equality before the law, the idea of civility in public life. This is all part of what these kind of movements seek to destroy. And it seems to me that at the end of the day, if we begin to think about this in the manner that I've suggested, I think maybe we can take a few steps forward. I hope so. Thank you very much.
Дорогие коллеги, у нас сейчас с докладом выступит Валерий, который руководит Центром мониторинга и сравнительного анализа кросс-культурной коммуникации. Он работает в Московском институте психоанализа. Пожалуйста, Валерий.
Микрофон не... А вот, сейчас работает. Уважаемые коллеги, я являюсь руководителем группы исследователей, международной группы исследователей, которые на протяжении последних 3 лет занимались проблемами межкультурных коммуникаций, ксенофобии и радикализма в современной Европе и накопили определенный статистический материал, с которым я бы и хотел, собственно говоря, вас познакомить. Честно говоря, анализ того, что мы сделали в области ксенофобии, показывает, что, несмотря на некоторые улучшения по определенным направлениям, по определенным параметрам, в целом ситуация в области ксенофобии ухудшается. Хотя, еще раз говорю, есть определенные исключения. Вот на ваших экранах это данные по мигрантофобии в Европе за 4 года. Выборка дана по 15 странам Европы. И здесь мы хорошо видим, что действительно происходит падение мигрантофобии примерно на 20% в среднем. О чем это говорит? И почему это произошло? Прежде всего, сработало, несмотря на определенные минусы, соглашение ЕС-Турция, которое затормозило на границах Турции примерно 3 миллиона беженцев. Очевидно, что дала эффект та программа, которую реализовывал Офис Верховного комиссара по правам беженцев Организации Объединенных Наций совместно с правительствами целого ряда европейских стран, в результате которых менялся имидж беженцев в глазах местного населения. Их стали воспринимать больше уже не как соискателей неких экономических благ, а действительно как жертв вооруженных конфликтов, как жертв, так сказать, войны и так далее. И, наконец, в-третьих, целый ряд стран европейских, это Австрия, Россия, это Словакия, целый ряд других государств, они приняли целый ряд законов, направленных на упорядочение миграционных процессов, но, если говорить простым языком, направленных на упрощение депортации так называемых незаконных мигрантов. Кроме всего прочего, был принят ряд законов и правил на уровне правоприменения, направленных на то, чтобы локализовать и изолировать те страны, беженцев из тех стран, которые действительно признаются небезопасными. С 2016 года в большинстве стран Европы, например, безопасными считается такая страна, как Афганистан. Да, поэтому практически 2017-2018 год было отсечение вот этой категории беженцев и аккумуляция вот этих потоков в основном из Сирии. Но так или иначе количество беженцев сократилось, имидж беженцев стал в Европе лучше, что в общем привело к тому, что действительно на 20% средний уровень мигрантофобии снизился, но он все равно очень высокий, потому что в таких странах, например, как Италия, Венгрия и Польша, мигрантофобия не опускается ниже 60%. Франция, Словакия, Россия и Греция не намного отстали от лидеров. Например, в России уровень мигрантофобии составляет 58%. А это выборка, опять-таки, по тем же странам, за 4 года по антицыганским настроениям. Антиромские настроения выросли во всех странах, кроме России. Это 17%, это один из, так сказать, низких уровней в Европе. И Франции 57%, там падение составило 4%. В остальном уровень цыганофобии вырос. В Италии это 83%, рост составил 1%. В Венгрии 72%, рост 8%. В Польше 59%, рост 12%. В Ирландии и Словакии это 75 и 79% соответственно. То есть мы видим, что уровень ромофобии, он в Европе, в общем-то, находится практически на максимальных пределах. Следующий уровень – это антисемитизм. Италия 25%, Венгрия 27%, Франция 20%. Это не данные АДЛ, это данные государственных, так сказать, это данные местных статистических, так сказать, органов. Самый высокий уровень антисемитизма в Европе — это Польша, 33%. Напоминаю, при минимальном еврейском присутствии. Это говорит о том, что для ксенофобии совершенно не обязателен предмет фобии. Да, 1000 евреев зарегистрированы в Польше, тем не менее, это самый высокий уровень антисемитизма. В Словакии 30%, на Украине 29%. Позитивная динамика присутствует только в Британии, падение на 2%, в Польше, несмотря на то, что высокий уровень, все-таки он упал на 4%, в России падение составило 2%, сегодня уровень антисемитизма в России, несмотря на исследования Левада-центра, составляет 4% по данным 2017 года. Ну, что касается данных Левада-центра за, так сказать, последних, это, так сказать, отдельная история, готов на эту тему поговорить. Теперь давайте посмотрим, что у нас происходит с исламофобией. Исламофобия, опять-таки, наиболее высокие уровни в тех странах, где меньше всего мусульман. Это Венгрия и Польша. Хотя, так сказать, по-прежнему высокий уровень демонстрирует и Италия, 60%, но в Италии происходит падение мигрантофобии на 4%, сейчас этот уровень на уровне 60%. Наименьший уровень, опять-таки, демонстрирует Россия и, так сказать, ряд других стран, где, в общем, происходит, да и вообще в Европе происходит разделение понятия мигрантов и мусульман. В целом в Европе к мигрантам стали относиться лучше. Отношение к мусульманам, оно осталось, опять-таки, практически на том же уровне. Более того, отношение к мусульманам ухудшилось в Европе. Ситуация в России другая, потому что в России традиционно различают мигрантов и мусульман. Все-таки для общественного мнения, для общественного сознания российского характерно восприятие мусульман как традиционных жителей Российской Федерации, которые проживают на Северном Кавказе, в Татарстане, Башкортостане и так далее. Поэтому здесь надо понимать вот эту разницу. Теперь давайте посмотрим, что у нас с преступлениями на почве ненависти. Вообще, конечно, сложно и практически невозможно проводить сравнительный анализ между странами, потому что разные критерии преступления ненависти, разная статистика, разное желание эту статистику демонстрировать. Есть страны, которые стремятся к тому, чтобы статистику скрывать и так далее, и так далее. Но, тем не менее, очень коротко пробегусь. Это Англия и Уэльс. Вы видите так сказать, взрывной рост преступлений на почве ненависти после Брексита. Оранжевый столбик – это общее количество преступлений на почве ненависти, а зеленый столбик – это насильственные преступления. Это Франция. Здесь происходит снижение общего числа преступлений ненависти при росте насильственных преступлений. О чем это говорит? Это говорит о том, что вообще грань очень тонкая между свободой слова и hate speech. Но понятно, что снижение преступления ненависти при такой картине происходит, общего числа преступлений ненависти происходит потому, что власть, в общем, стала более лояльно и либерально относиться к понятию hate speech. И поэтому ситуация такая, вполне возможно, что это явилось одной из причин роста насильственных преступлений. Поскольку преступник, не остановленный на стадии hate speech, вполне может взять в руки оружие и, так сказать, продолжить дальше свою деятельность. Это Польша, примерно такая же ситуация, как во Франции. Это Греция. С Грецией особая история. Здесь действительно произошел всплеск и очень сильные преступления на почве ненависти, но с другой стороны здесь прозрачнее стала статистика. Мы вот сейчас проводили нашей группой конференцию в Афинах. Там были представители Польского министерства внутренних дел, были представители Министерства юстиции, которые говорят откровенно, что мы стали лучше считать. Мы стали больше внимания уделять статистике, мы стали чаще возбуждать уголовные дела. Поэтому вот этот взрывной рост, надо понимать, что это, в общем, в том числе и результат того, что власть стала как-то более активно реагировать на преступления ненависти. Хотя должен сказать, что Греция относится к тем странам, которые не дают официальную статистику. Я не знаю, есть она у них или нет, но это данные неправительственных организаций. Это Украина. Мне здесь нечего сказать, потому что это тенденция, да? Потому что, например, организация, занимающаяся защитой прав гомосексуалистов, так сказать, организация, которая борется с гомофобией, она констатировала по итогам 2017 года 220 преступлений ненависти, поэтому это никакие не 65, конечно. А аффилированная с властью, так сказать, еврейская организация дает 35 преступлений на почве антисемитизма, что, в общем, конечно, говорит о том, что ни о каких 65 преступлениях, которые дает Генеральная прокуратура Украины, речи быть не может. Но как тенденция она, в общем-то, характерна. Это Германия. Германия единственная страна, которая действительно дала эффект в том плане, что полиция и власти начали работать очень эффективно, как в том, что касается ненасильственных преступлений, так и в том, что касается насильственных преступлений. И несмотря на так сказать, последние вот эти вот выступления, Хаймниц и все остальное, там радикалы не смогли вывести больше 1000 человек, хотя еще год назад выводили десятки тысяч. И это говорит о том, что, в общем, ситуация начинает вот как-то меняться. Кстати, хочу сказать, что Германия единственная страна, где рост антисемитизма, в смысле преступлений на почве антисемитизма, связан прежде всего с преступлениями праворадикалов. Да, хотя там почти в 2 раза выросло число антисемитских преступлений, которые совершили исламские организации, тем не менее, это все-таки 5% по сравнению с 95%, которые совершаются праворадикалами. И это Россия. Россия единственная страна, которая дает противоречивую тенденцию, рост общего числа преступлений ненависти при резком снижении насильственных преступлений. Ну вот выступал Михаил Александрович Федотов, говорил о том, что принят с подачи президента и Верховного суда закон, который, ну, так сказать, либерализует наше законодательство. И, в общем, теперь за лайки в тюрьму, слава богу, сажать не будут, а будут ограничиваться административными преступлениями. Но несмотря на это, несмотря на всю жесткость и даже, может быть, жестокость российского законодательства, я могу сказать, она дала эффект. Я работаю в Федерации еврейских общин России, занимаясь вопросами антисемитизма на протяжении почти 10 лет. Я прекрасно помню, как я был в переписке с Генеральной прокуратурой по поводу регулярных, так сказать, преступлений на еврейских кладбищах. Вот этого сейчас нет ничего. Благодаря тому, что российские правоохранительные органы исходят из того, что если ты остановил преступника на стадии hate speech, он не пойдет уже убивать и грабить, да, и кого-то бить. Да, так сказать, любой преступник, который совершает насильственные преступления, прежде чем это сделать, заходит в интернет, делится своими идеями, так сказать, находит сторонников и так далее. Остановив его на этом этапе, можно воздействовать на преступление. Вопрос, как останавливать. Теперь вот эта тенденция роста насильственных преступлений в Европе, это просто показывает, насколько выросли эти преступления. Вот самый высокий рост – это Греция, а отрицательный прирост – это Германия и Россия. Кто бенефициары? Ну, дело в том, что существуют разные точки зрения, почему растет ненависть в стране, вернее в мире. Кто-то говорит о том, что это вот праворадикальные партии, кто-то говорит о том, что это вот миграционный кризис, хотя мигрантофобия мы видим упала. Я считаю, что причина гораздо глубже. В принципе, ксенофобия – это бизнес. Это очень выгодный бизнес в политическом плане. И мы сами создали систему, которая автоматически создает вот эту вот ксенофобию, создает эту ненависть. Потому что здесь много заинтересованных лиц. И определенную роль играет здесь и государство. Потому что государство устанавливает правила игры. Государство устанавливает правила интеграции меньшинств. И, к сожалению, в Европе, я не говорю про Америку, я не говорю про все остальное, единственная, так сказать, модель, которая присутствует, наиболее распространенная интеграция меньшинств, это ассимиляция, которая по статистике отвергается примерно 25-28% самих мигрантов, которые замыкаются в созданные ими самими гетто и становятся там объектом обработки радикалов. К сожалению, других моделей государство не предлагает. И вот просто... Ой, а как мне назад вернуться? Вот. И это данные Bloomberg. Это мусульманские общины, число мусульман. Вот ярко-зеленым это то количество, так сказать, мусульман, которые отказываются констатировать, которые отказываются контактировать с немусульманами и вообще с коренными жителями. Да? Это очень высокие цифры, это порядка 22-33% в самых разных странах. В итоге я уже заканчиваю, мы получаем кольцо ксенофобии, когда государство, совершающее ошибки в области интеграции, создает условия для дискриминации меньшинств. Этим пользуются радикалы самых разных сторон, которые разжигают ненависть и ксенофобию. Появилось такое понятие, как испуганный электорат, который голосует, опять-таки, вот за правоцентристские и праворадикальные партии, которые, собственно говоря, сегодня и выигрывают выборы, которые снова формируют правительство и совершают еще большие ошибки в области интеграции, потому что это уже требует испуганный электорат. И последний слайд, который я покажу, это что самое страшное, что сейчас происходит. Происходит процесс сближения между праворадикалами и правоцентристами. Правоцентристы, оправившись от миграционного кризиса, очень эффективно работают на праворадикальном поле. Один лишь пример, который я приведу по Дании. В Дании в 2018 году было принято постановление, согласно которому вводилось понятие мусульманского гетто. Там 22 района. В этих 22 районах теперь совершение преступлений, а это Дания, это та страна, где правительство входит праворадикал. Теперь за совершение преступлений на территории этого гетто следует двойное наказание. Теперь, если родители решают отправить своих детей на родину своих предков, чтобы дети приобщились к мусульманским ценностям, это 4 года тюрьмы. И младенцы, которые достигли 1 года, на 25 часов в неделю изымаются из семей для приобщения к так называемым датским ценностям. Там, кроме датского языка, еще Рождество, традиция Рождества и Пасхи. Это лишь один пример, который я приведу. Проигрывают здесь абсолютно все. Да? Реально наше общество движется к монокультурному, к моноэтничному, так сказать, обществу. Проигрывают все. Проигрывают меньшинство, проигрывает большинство, которое получает расколотое общество, выигрывают политические игроки. И это, поэтому я говорю, что это бизнес, который будет развиваться вне зависимости ни от чего. И здесь необходимо пересмотреть и политику интеграции, и, так сказать, национальную и религиозную политику. Мы действительно в очень тяжелой, так сказать, ситуации. Европейское общество находится в состоянии кризиса, и пока выхода из этого кризиса совершенно не видно. К сожалению, время мое истекло. Спасибо. У нас есть вот этот вот... сайта нет, но неважно, civicnation.org, там можно получить всю нашу информацию. Спасибо.
Спасибо, Валерий. Спасибо. Дорогие коллеги, мы услышали ряд выступлений. Есть ли вопросы и комментарии? Я понимаю, что целый день борьбы с антисемитизмом, 2 дня, но сегодня день Аллы. Да, спасибо за великолепное уточнение. И я уже чувствую усталость сознаний вот, после этой борьбы. Хотя у многих пепел класса стучит в их сердце. Вместе с тем... Поскольку у нас роль тогда модераторов в этой такой своеобразной роли, может быть, я попрошу вас, коллега, сказать несколько фраз. Пожалуйста, Майкл. Профессор Беренбаум, пожалуйста. Ваши краткие.
I think this has been very instructive. We're grateful for each of the participants, and I think one of the things that we take away from all of this is the absolute importance of civic society and also the strengthening of moderation and the center, because the polarization that takes place and the extreme right and the extreme left become a deep danger to the values of pluralism, tolerance, decency, and they become a threat to bring about racism, anti-Semitism, and xenophobia. Thank you very much.
Спасибо. Вопрос? все, завершаю.
Добрый день всем присутствующим. Я представляю Латвию, доктор экономики Зейберт. Я обращаюсь к своим коллегам, господину Энгелу. В Латвии сейчас очень бурно развивается неонацизм и расизм, главным образом против русской диаспоры Латвии. У меня такой вопрос. Наследники ВАФН-СС и СД, которые сейчас в всех углах говорят против русских, вокзал, чемодан Россия, не будет такой момент через некоторое время обрушиться против еврейской общины в Латвии? Спасибо.
Если можно, краткий ответ, поскольку по времени...
Он будет очень краткий, я просто не буду отвечать на этот вопрос, поскольку боюсь. Я проживаю в Латвии, на 2 число вызван в полицию безопасности на собеседование, поэтому я не буду отвечать на этот вопрос.
Это уже ответ. Коллеги, мы говорим об идеологии, о политике, но за этим ответом реальная жизнь. Вы это все услышали. Тогда я хочу поблагодарить еще раз всех наших коллег, которые вывели проблематику антисемитизма в более широкое поле, показали целый ряд важнейших инструментов действия, которые помогли бы противостоять и антисемитизму, и расизму, и ксенофобии. И есть такое понятие в ряде наук, называется когнитивная сложность, cognitive complexity, когда мы видим явление антисемитизма уже более ярко и не делаем глобальных выводов. И, как было сказано, не кричим все время «волки, волки», обесценивая это явление, а пытаясь понять все его разнообразие, всю его сложность, всю его включенность в иные системы координат. Спасибо всем за сегодняшнее выступление.
Я хочу лишь добавить, что я живу в Латвии, поэтому я так говорю.
Дорогие, уважаемые друзья и коллеги,